All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for de-escalation strategies and positive interactions. My name is Danielle Daly. I'm the professional development coordinator here with the Illinois Crisis Prevention Network. I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping things, and then Zach and Tiffany will get you started. Everyone is muted. Your cameras are disabled. Please use that chat box feature. I know that Zach and Tiffany are going to ask you to be interactive throughout the presentation and are going to be asking questions. So please use that chat box feature. You can also use the Q&A if you wish to ask questions, just to make sure that those don't get lost in the chat box. Please visit our website, icpn.org. You can view all of our upcoming trainings as well as review some past trainings. It'll connect you to our YouTube site, which has some of our past trainings recorded on there. You can also sign up to receive future mailings about our webinars on the top right-hand corner of the website. Also on the website is information about our 7th annual ICPN conference, which will be held March 28th in Springfield and March 29th in Naperville. So be sure to check out that information and register. Give me about 14 days to get continuing education out to you. It'll come to the email address that you have registered with. And I will put all the information into the chat box along with my email address. If you do not receive your continuing education within after that 14 days, please contact me, reach out to me, and we can get everyone settled. That is all I have. So Zach and Tiffany, take it away.
Thanks, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. So welcome to de-escalation strategies and positive interactions.
Sorry.
There we go. So if you already couldn't tell, we chose to do a Men in Black theme today. You can kind of see our fun backgrounds that we found. Zach and I are part of the behavior team in the Rockford location for ICPN SST. So we're always looking at the function of our clients' behavior. So we kind of came up with our own little FBI function-based investigations, and we will be your de-escalagents today. So a quick outline for what we're going to be talking about today. We're definitely going to start with reviewing safety. Safety is always the most important thing that we want to focus on first. And then we'll get into the 3 strategies of de-escalation with that help, prompt, wait. And then we'll talk about positive interactions, negative interactions, and we'll try to have a little bit of fun along the way, and especially at the end. So make sure you stick around. And just like a quick note, kind of going over everything. A lot of this is derived from safety care. So if you are familiar with that, there's going to be a lot of kind of referencing to safety care and those, 3 strategies that we're talking about today. If you're not familiar, safety care is a really great way to de-escalate the clients that we've got. So let's begin.
All right, so when someone exhibits a disruptive or dangerous behavior, de-escalation interventions may be useful to bring the situation from a crisis to calm type of scenario. The goals of de-escalation that we'll be covering in this training are listed here on the slide. Number 1, we want to maintain the safety of individuals you work with and everyone else. 2, we want to avoid making the situation worse or making someone more agitated. 3, we want to help individuals reduce the intensity of crisis behaviors. And the last one there, number 4, we want to avoid reinforcing crisis behaviors so that they do not become more likely in the future. So we're going to elaborate on all those on these slides that we're about to go over.
All right. What about behavior plans though, right? A lot of our clients have behavior plans that outline proactive and reactive strategies to approach challenging behavior specific to that person. And it's recommended that staff be trained on behavior plans as regularly as possible, just to maintain that consistency in everyone's approach across, settings and across different shifts. So that's always going to contribute to the success of any behavior intervention, as long as we're continuing to make sure that our staff are familiar with behavior plans before they work with an individual. But de-escalation interventions that we're going to talk about today will be, like I said before, from safety care. They can be very useful to implement with clients that maybe don't have behavior plans in place, or a new behavior is popping up, or a new situation that the client is being triggered by. So sometimes we'll get like a new client that moves in, or and maybe that client is having an issue, or maybe someone else is moving into our client's home and that's triggering them to have, a new behavior of some sort. So using some of these strategies can really help address those unfamiliar behaviors, and kind of helping us figure things out until we can get a behavior plan into place if this behavior continues to be kind of shown by that individual.
All right, so when de-escalating a situation, it's important to maintain the safety of everyone in the environment. This is always better to have more staff assisting if there is more than one staff available. Obviously, that's not always going to be the case. So calling for assistance could mean calling for the staff by name if they are close by, or making a phone call if it's safe to do so. So as Tiffany mentioned, some individuals have behavior plans in place that may give specific guidance on how to respond to a crisis situation. Staff should familiarize themselves with this plan so they know how to respond prior to the situation occurring. To keep direction clear and consistent, if there's more than one staff should be the leader and the other staff should assist. This should be communicated to your partner so it is clear who is taking the lead, as this person is going to be the one giving the verbal directions to the upset individual. This is often the more experienced staff, but depending on the severity of the situation, this may be a good opportunity for a newer staff to build rapport with the individual, and this will just help to have that more experienced staff member present with you. So if it's more severe, probably have the more experienced staff, but then if it's like a less severe situation, really try and build that rapport. Safety is always the main goal in a crisis situation. This is obviously true for the person who is upset and the staff working with them, but also for other individuals in the environment, such as peers, community members, or just other people around. This is especially important for those that are unable to move away quickly, or are maybe more vulnerable due to not being able to protect themselves. Staff should also ensure that the environment is safe by observing and addressing hazards in the environment. This could be objects that could be easily thrown, sharps, cleaning supplies, medications, slippery surfaces. The list goes on and on for that, but just, be mindful of what's in the environment when somebody's upset. Staff should always stand in an area that leaves them the ability to move away quickly and safely from the agitated person. Staff should try and stand close to an exit of a room and not back themselves into a corner or up against a wall or other tight space, or sit in a chair with arms that could restrict their ability to get up.
Yeah, and we kind of talk about a lot of these things as we move through the presentation too. So safety is always, at the top of the list there to keep an eye on and always kind of remember. So you'll hear a lot of that repeated as we go through too. And being proactive when someone's becoming escalated, it's the safest thing and the smartest thing to make sure that nothing on your body could be pulled or otherwise kind of causing harm to you. So we want to just make sure that if you're wearing jewelry, if you've got like dangly earrings, or even like earrings that could just like be tugged, we want to make sure that we take that off. If you have, your grandmother's necklace on and you don't want that to be, broken, take that off. And then obviously like glasses and things like that, you want to take those off too, if you've got the time to. And then with certain clients, we might have like arm guards available to us. So if there is any safety or protective clothing available, you might, and if you've got the time, we want to put those on to protect ourselves. It's kind of like being on an airplane, right? So we always are told when they're going through like that safety thing in the very beginning of the flight of if we need to put oxygen masks on, we always put them on ourselves first so that we can then help others around us put their masks on. We always want to make sure that we can be as safe as possible first and protect ourselves so that we can protect everyone around us. So that's going to be something very important to try to remember. And I know, in crisis situations, it's kind of hard to always remember those things, but this is always something that you can review later and kind of get into your brain to think about next time you've got to deal with a tough situation. We also always want to make sure that we maintain a level of respect and dignity to the people that we're serving. We don't want to make someone feel bad or embarrassed by their actions or reactions to their environment. I know for me personally, I suffer from anxiety and I just like sweat. And so I don't want to have that pointed out that I'm like sweating through my clothes in an anxious moment. That's embarrassing and it makes me more anxious, right? So we always want to make sure that we're respectful and we can kind of maintain the dignity of the people that we're serving. Sometimes we can feel targeted and take things personally. I've definitely walked into a home and have felt that, someone was kind of going into a behavior and as soon as they saw me, they're like, it's going down. So it's our job to check in with ourselves and make sure that we can continue to communicate respect and dignity to those we're serving. If you find that you're losing your cool, you're taking things personally, you're starting to feel aggravated or upset with what's going on, tap out if possible. We always want to be checking in with ourselves and making sure that we're able to maintain safety, maintain respect and dignity. And so if we can tap out, make sure that you're tapping out, or if you need to call for help or call 911 or kind of, get yourself to a safe place, we do that. If the person is becoming really loud, we want to maintain a quieter or conversation level of voice, because I don't know if you guys have noticed in these situations, but if someone's loud and we're trying to help them, we might start to meet them at their level and then they end up getting higher in their tone of voice to speak over us. Right? So then it just becomes louder and louder and louder and more escalated and everyone's more agitated and loud. So we want to try to get them to meet us at a quieter tone of voice to kind of help calm the situation as well. By maintaining that quiet and calm demeanor, that's more likely that the person is to meet you where you're at and your body language and demeanor as well. We also need to be mindful of our facial expressions and the way that we're standing, so we're not alerting the person that we're heightened in our responses to. We want to stand with our arms, kind of open and prepared for whatever's going to happen at our sides and position ourselves by an exit, like Zach was kind of saying before. We don't want to stand, the furthest from an exit in a corner of a room where someone can kind of get at us. So always be mindful of where you're standing in a room as well. Even if we need to leave to protect ourselves, right? Never stand with your back to the person. That can be kind of scary too. We also want to avoid power struggles whenever possible. And I know sometimes it's hard to be mindful of that because we don't necessarily always have that awareness, especially in a stressful situation. I do have one really good example that happened this past year with a client. We were alerted that a situation had happened where the client became aggressive towards a staff member. And when we got the information of what had happened prior to, our client's escalation, our client had said, "Hey, I drew you a picture" to the staff member. And the staff member said, "Oh, thank you. This is awesome. I'll hang it up when I get home." And my client said, "Well, where are you going to hang it up? Can you hang it up on your fridge?" And the staff said, "No, I think I'll hang it up in the window or something." It was just a different place that my client wanted it to be hung up. And so, the person that we served said, "No, I want you to hang it up in this specific place when you get home." And the staff member continued to argue with them and say, "Well, it's my house. I'm going to hang it where I want to." And that made my client upset and they became escalated and they, came after the staff, and the staff ended up having to, kind of get away and call for help. So in that situation, I'm not encouraging people to lie to the people that we serve, but in that situation, is the client going to know that you hung it up on your closet versus your fridge versus your window? No, because we're not taking our clients home with us. So a little white lie like that to prevent a power struggle is going to be, the best bet. Lastly, we always want to reinforce safe, desirable behaviors. We can always catch someone doing something good, even when maybe they're doing other, things. So we want to let them know that they're awesome for helping with the dishes or expressing their feelings to you with their words. Even if maybe they're yelling at you with, how they're feeling, we can say, thank you for letting me know how you're feeling. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more in a quieter, calm voice, and hopefully they'll meet us at that level, and then we can praise that. I see in the chat box, you guys are saying always pick your battles. Yes, I agree.
All right, so this next slide here, escalation and de-escalation typically happen in observable steps. To help visually represent this, we're using a staircase to represent calm being the bottom step, and each step up represents an increase in escalation, leading to the top step, which represents a crisis situation. So initial signs of agitation could be something simple like whining. So we're going to use the chat box here to think of other examples of things that you might have seen or things that you think might be initial signs of agitation. So go ahead, and if you guys want to interact a little and type some stuff in the chat box. And yep, pacing is a good one. I see multiple people saying that. Muttering under their breath. Yelling could be. Hand wringing. They're coming in quick. I'm sorry if I'm missing some. Rubbing hands together, head down, fidgeting. I see somebody said SIB. We're going to talk about SIB in a second because that could be an initial sign if it's not causing injury to the person, but that could be a more dangerous thing depending on the significance of the SIB. Shaking hands.
These are all really good, guys.
Yeah. Thank you guys all for participating. I think we just broke 400 people on this Zoom. There's 403 people right now.
Don't tell me that. You're going to freak me out, Zach.
Oh, sorry, Tiffany. I've been watching it, getting anxious myself. All right, great, guys. Yeah, all of those look awesome. Thank you guys for participating. So we're going to go on to the next one here. So moving up the staircase, leading to higher intensity disruptive behaviors. One example of this could be screaming. Can you guys think of other stuff that might be a little bit more significant than those initial signs of agitation, but are starting to become more disruptive, but not quite dangerous? We're not quite at like a crisis situation just yet.
Banging on things, yeah.
Shoving chairs, yeah. Slamming doors, great. Swinging arms, throwing things. Vulgar language. Good. Hitting. And hitting could also be dangerous too, depending on the significance of the hits. Good. Stomping. Being on walls. Great examples, guys. Attempting to elope, yeah. Good. Awesome. Slamming cabinet doors. So then the last one here, so if the escalation continues, sometimes this could lead to dangerous behaviors. So, like we have like hitting listed as one, I know somebody had said earlier, SIB, successfully eloping could be another. I've seen that in the chat box. Yep, I see somebody just put it again. Perfect. Yep. Spitting, kicking, throwing things, could definitely be a dangerous behavior depending on what you're throwing and who you're throwing it at. Biting, yep, another one. Breaking objects, property destruction, good. Yep, hitting their head on the wall or floor, yeah, definitely scary crisis level stuff. Food refusal could be if like it's going on for a significant period of time. Good. Awesome, thank you guys for participating. That makes it a lot better when we have people going back and forth with us. So depending on the situation, this could happen slowly or quickly. So picture the staircase with more or less steps, or maybe taller or shorter steps, depending on the time that it's taking for that person to escalate. They could move very quickly from, just being agitated, to exhibiting some of these dangerous behaviors. So, make sure, you're trying to understand the person that you're working with. If they have a behavior plan or a crisis plan, a personal plan, make sure you're reading that, because it's only going to help you understand the individual better. So in all cases of de-escalation, it's most effective when we intervene as early as possible.
All right, so getting into our 3 strategies. And like we had said earlier, these are all derived from safety care. So if you guys do have access to that safety care manual, you can always reference that too. These are the 3 strategies in de-escalation that we're going to be using today is help, prompt, wait. With all of these, we always want to intervene as early as possible because that's going to be our best bet at de-escalating a person and even preventing them from escalating further. Also with all of these, we always want to maintain that calm, neutral tone of voice, facial expression, and body language as much as possible. I know that can be really hard to do. So, it takes time and practice, right? And then we always want to praise the person for any compliance with requests and appropriate communication. So even if, they're saying, I effing want to, take a break. Thank you for communicating that you want to take a break. Let's go take a break. We can always work on, not swearing later. We don't have to work on it now. And I have seen staff, kind of pick those battles in the middle of escalation of, well, you shouldn't be swearing. And let's focus on the fact that they're communicating with us right now. They are agitated. They're not going to learn, not to swear right now when they're agitated. We'll take note of that and work on it later. De-escalation also doesn't have to be the most negative and stressful experience either. If we can catch the person before they escalate further, and if we can provide praise to make them feel good about making safe and appropriate choices for themselves. So just kind of focusing on what can we catch them doing right? Let's praise it. Let's encourage that behavior. Obviously, it can get very stressful if it continues to escalate, but it doesn't have to always get there. It doesn't always go there, and it doesn't always have to be a stressful experience. So just trying to kind of focus on that positive.
All right, so using the example of the staircase again, we're now going to discuss the help, prompt, wait in more detail and how those strategies can be used in regards just how each strategy is used to de-escalate the situation. So overall, this visual, as well as the stoplight, may be helpful images to have in your mind when you're de-escalating a situation. So as you'll learn from these next few slides, you may have to climb the staircase, like we were saying, faster or slower, or skip steps based on where the person is on the scale from crisis or calm to crisis.
All right. So I did notice in the chat box, someone had said there's a small segment of population who react negatively to being praised. We definitely have seen that before too. So it is good, especially if you can build rapport, with your clients beforehand and even afterhand as well. We'll kind of talk about that too. And just kind of figuring out what is reinforcing for the person and figuring out how we can reinforce them to have those safe behaviors. Also for the person that's late, if you couldn't already tell, we're Men in Black theme. It's got to be weird popping in now being like, what is happening? All right, so back to our help strategy here. This is the kind of bottom of the staircase, that green on the traffic light there. So when we're seeing those really kind of beginning stages of escalation or agitation, like we had said earlier, maybe they're pacing, maybe, they're kind of muttering under their breath. Maybe they just become super quiet all of a sudden. Maybe their eyes are getting big. I think those were some examples people had said. So we're going to make sure that we're kind of paying attention to those mild signs of agitation. Many individuals that we serve might not have the tools to communicate their needs or wants effectively, especially if there's something new that's agitating them and they don't quite understand why it's agitating them, or that that's the thing that's agitating them. And they can become frustrated. Behavior is communication, and it's our job to help those that we serve to get their needs met in a safe way. The agitated person might want attention from staff or peers. They might want something to eat or drink. They might want help with a task or activity or access to their favorite store, but they might not be able to express this to others effectively. So that's when they're kind of like displaying these behaviors because they can't quite get out what needs to happen to make them feel better. By using this help strategy, we may be able to prompt the person to communicate their needs with us in a more appropriate and safe manner instead of further escalating to crisis behaviors. This step in the process might be difficult to gauge, that we need to use, because if we don't know the person or we're unfamiliar with them, or if it's a new unfamiliar situation that they're in and they've never acted this way, we're like, what's going on? And we might not understand that this is the beginning steps of them escalating. So typically we'll use this strategy when we do notice mild signs of agitation in a person, and we might not be able to tell as easily with newer clients. These are mild signs of agitation that can be changes in someone's tone of voice, facial expressions, someone rocking, like we had said before. And this is the strategy that we use when, we think that the person is most likely to talk with us, ask for something, earliest steps of escalation. Yeah, and I think someone in the chat box had said, if they're not feeling well, they might not be able to express it. And then they, kind of have a behavior from that. So then we've got Chris Helmsworth, or Hemsworth, is that how you say it, here? And he's, this is from that new Men in Black movie. I don't think I've actually seen it, but I thought this was kind of appropriate. He's asking if you're hungry, just like we might ask someone in the help strategy of, hey, what's going on? Are you hungry? Do you need something? How can I help you?
All right. So talking more about the help strategy, when approaching an individual to offer help, it's best to approach in a non-intimidating stance. So this could mean, having your arms uncrossed, like Tiffany talked about earlier. If your arms are crossed, you're going to look more serious potentially. So having them down by your sides, but ready to respond, approaching slowly and within the individual's sight as not to startle them. And the list goes on, just be non-intimidating. It is best to remain about 2 of the individual's arm's length away from them to allow space if the situation were to escalate, so you could move away safely. This From here, you could then offer help to the individual if you know what they need. If you don't know, you could then prompt them to tell you what they need or want, using their form of communication, whether it's speech, a communication device, picture cards, signs, gestures, walking them, having them walk you to whatever they're looking for, just basically whatever communication method works for them if they're capable of doing so. Always allow then 5 to 10 seconds for the person to process what was said before you ask again. Because if you're repeatedly asking the person over and over again to get a response, this could just cause the situation to escalate further. If the person makes the request, immediately thank them for communicating what they want. Like the example that Tiffany used, even if the person swears at you, but they say they want a break, try to honor that request that was made, whatever it might be. Sometimes that's not possible, but to the best of your ability, try to just to reinforce that communication. If something's not available, really try and avoid the word no, and instead offer choices that are available that come close to the request that was made. So the individual still kind of feels like they're getting, what they wanted. If the strategy is used and it leads to further agitation, it may be best to consider moving on to another strategy, which we're going to talk about next.
Just some quick considerations when it comes to this strategy. Sometimes we know our clients and we've worked with them for 5, 10, 20 years. And we know them like the back of our hand, we know them like our family member, but this doesn't mean that we can always assume what someone wants or needs. And kind of going off of that too, we don't always want to just give the person what we're assuming that they want or need either, because in this situation, they're kind of displaying some type of, beginning behaviors, right? So if we just assume, oh, they just want some coffee, I'm going to give them some coffee. Next time, they're going to do the same thing to get coffee instead of using a more appropriate behavior to get that coffee. So we really want to kind of intervene and prompt them to use some type of communication to get the coffee that's more appropriate than pacing or, throwing something. So just because we know everybody and we can kind of assume what's going on, we definitely want to make sure that we're always prompting someone to be as appropriate as possible. And then, sorry, I lost my place there. So we want them to communicate in any appropriate way they can to obtain what they want first. You might prompt them to ask for something that we think they want. You can also give someone choices, like Zach had said, in what is available. So we're trying to kind of attempt to figure out what they want. So giving them a choice of, did you want maybe a drink of water or do you want to take a walk? You can also prompt them to show you or tell you. If the person's showing any signs of agitation, don't worry about that politeness like we kind of talked about before. We can work on manners later when everyone is calm and happy and ready to learn. As we learn about others' triggers, we can also prompt them to communicate their wants and needs before a situation. So maybe if there is a new bus driver that this person doesn't like for whatever reason, we can kind of prompt them, to use their coping skills before the bus comes, instead of kind of letting the bus come, they see the new bus driver and then they get upset. So just kind of keeping in mind as we learn people's triggers that let's be proactive as possible and prompt them to communicate their needs or prompt them to work on those coping skills beforehand.
All right, so let's discuss some instances of when you would move on to the prompt strategy. So this strategy would be good to use if the help strategy is not working. As discussed previously, this would be if the person is becoming more agitated by you offering help, not responding to your request, even with additional processing time provided, or is becoming more upset when not being able to access or do what they have communicated. This also could be used when you know the person is likely to comply to a request that you're providing. So we'll give an example of what this might look like on the next slide. Another time that you may use this strategy is when the behavior has become severe or gone on for an extended period of time.
So in using the prompt strategy, instead of, I don't know how many times I've seen, someone tell a client, calm down, stop. I personally don't want to hear those things when I'm not calm. So instead of doing that, we're going to ask the individual to engage in a behavior that they're likely to engage in, something that they know how to do, something that they can do right now, and something that's not super reinforcing, because we don't want to reinforce this, behavior that they're displaying. Some examples are sitting down, putting hands on your lap, getting a drink of water, putting an item down or away. So we definitely want to kind of first steps in this prompt strategy, we're going to identify either an incompatible or a high probability behavior to prompt the person to engage in. And what I mean by incompatible is something that they can engage in that they couldn't do if they were displaying the behavior. So if someone is hitting or, using their hand to display some type of behavior, we're going to find something incompatible. So we need something that they can do with their hands so that they stop hitting, right? So maybe I prompt them to clap their hands. What if they start clapping really, really loud because they're getting upset? Maybe we can ask them to kind of sit on their hands or squish a squishy ball. Something that's high probability, which means something that they can do right now, they're likely to do something that is really easy for them to do right now. Then we are going to approach them with at least 2 of their arm's length distance from you. That way we're maintaining our safety so that we can maintain theirs. We want to prompt that desired behavior in a calm, neutral tone of voice as much as possible. We're going to allow them 5 to 10 seconds to process that request, because when you're upset, it might take you a minute to kind of get back to reality and hear what's going on around you, right? And then we're going to praise any cooperation. After that, we're going to begin again with another incompatible or high probability behavior. If they continue to be cooperative, then we're going to consider switching to the help strategy. We're going to go back down those steps. If they're not cooperative, we're going to identify a different behavior and start over, see if they'll, maybe be cooperative with something else we can find for them to do. If signs of agitation increase, then we're just going to stop right there and consider switching to a different strategy. We don't want to make them more agitated by prompting them to do something that they're getting annoyed with you prompting them to do, right? Sometimes individuals might respond better to another staff member that maybe they're not mad at right now. So you might want to try, hey, it's not working for me. Do you want to try? And then if it's not working for that staff member, let's switch to a different strategy. Also, if the person engages in an incompatible behavior or a high probability behavior that is safe without our prompting, we're going to reinforce that too immediately.
So I see a bunch of people are putting stuff in the chat, and I think that's going to be really applicable for this side for examples that we're going to ask for. So in this slide, we've listed some challenging behaviors that a person may be exhibiting, and are going to use the chat box to list some of those examples of incompatible behaviors that you could prompt someone to do. So as stated previously in Tiffany's last slide, an incompatible behavior is a behavior that you cannot physically do at the same time as another behavior. So for example, you could not hit another person if you had your hands in your pockets. So let's start with the first one there. We have the behavior of yelling. What could you prompt someone to do if they're yelling and you wanted them to stop exhibiting this behavior? I saw someone, drink water. I saw someone before said, take some deep breaths. That's a good example. Singing the ABCs, start to whisper. Talk like a robot. I love it. That's a good one. Singing, a lot of people saying singing, talking softer, counting to 10. Ask them a question, humming, all great examples.
Either
whistling, deep breathing. All right. Read out loud. Yeah, that could be good. They could, I guess, still yell the words in the book, but at least they're doing something instead. It's productive. Sing or laugh. Good. So then we'll move on to the next one, slamming a door. Do you guys have some examples of an incompatible behavior for slamming a door? Snap fingers. Good. Clap your hands. Yeah, basically keeping their hands occupied, or maybe their body occupied if they're using their body to slam the door. Clapping, dancing, get out a drum. Fidgets. I think I saw somebody earlier said a pop-it. We have a lot of clients that really enjoy those. Yep, give them a task like carrying some papers, bouncing a ball. Again, I'm sorry if I'm missing some. They come in pretty quick. Yeah, a lot of fidgets. Great answers, guys. So then we'll move on to the last one here, stomping your feet. Going for a walk, good. Yeah, it'd be more appropriate, obviously, to stomp your feet outside than inside. Dancing. Yeah, a lot of dancing, good. Marching. Maybe even like having them like go somewhere, like giving them a job to do and walking somewhere. Good. Exercise, that's a good one. Good. Sitting down. You could still potentially stomp your feet, I guess, if you're sitting down. I guess if you're maybe in like a recliner chair with your feet up, that would be incompatible. Good. All right, so we'll move on to the next one here. So at the bottom there, we have some high probability behaviors listed. So if you guys can think of others, you guys can definitely throw them in the chat box. Remember that this is the behavior that the person's likely to comply with and can do in the moment, and they already know how to do it. So this is going to vary person to person. Not everybody's maybe going to be able to like journal, but other people might be able to, let's see what you guys got here. Assisting staff with an activity. Yep, maybe something that they know how to do. Getting more specifically, like maybe wiping off the counters with a towel or something, something that they're able to help with to kind of redirect them from being upset. Good. So other ones that we had listed on the slide here, obviously you guys can read them too, drinking some water, sitting down with you, washing hands. A lot of the stuff that you guys already listed too is great, high probability type behaviors. Folding towels, great. Awesome. Thank you guys again for the participation. So we'll move on to the next slide here. Draw a picture, I see. Good.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, you're good. I just saw one more pop up.
Offer preferred activity they enjoy if possible. All right, when to use weight. So now we're at that top of the staircase. We are on the red light. Things have gotten pretty heated, right? So we're going to use weight when help and prompt have not been working. They're just getting more and more agitated. So we're going to get on up to weight. Maybe we know that this person tends to become less angry if given time to just, chill and settle. Nothing else is working. Nothing that we're doing is working. That's when we're going to use weight. This is when we're going to monitor the situation and give the person time. So sometimes we can't always correctly gauge where the person is in their escalation because, some behaviors for one person might be, the bottom of the staircase, and that same behavior for another person could be the top. So it's kind of hard to gauge sometimes, especially if we don't know the person's new to us. It's a little bit easier when we do know the person and maybe it's just a new situation. But this is when we're going to kind of try waiting the person out. Depending on the person, we might skip to wait. We might just say, you know what, this person does best when they have time to themselves, even if they're just at that beginning part of their escalation. If we just skip to wait, they have time to kind of remove themselves from whatever's going on, whatever's bugging them. They get to, hang out, calm down on their own, de-escalate, take a break. And then we can have them kind of return to whatever activity or, environment when they're calm again. I definitely have people on my caseload that I would, just skip to this strategy because they do best when they have time alone. Maybe they're overstimulated and they just need to be removed from that situation for a minute and give themselves, time to kind of decompress, and then they can come back and they're fine again. And it doesn't have to be, that crazy, like heightened behaviors either. We definitely want to use this, like I had said, to give the person time. We want to monitor them for safety and, make sure everyone around us is safe as well.
All right. So when using the weight strategy, it's important to first ask the individual to move to a different area if necessary for safety and if possible to do so. If this is not possible, potentially asking other individuals to leave the area or removing dangerous objects could be a good alternative. Make sure to be mindful of objects in the environment due to something that may seem harmless, like a coffee cup becoming dangerous if it's thrown or spilled on someone. I saw somebody said in the chat box too, fidget spinners hurt when they're thrown. I'd imagine so. So make sure that you're handing appropriate things to the individuals, when they're upset. Obviously, if, somebody's upset, you might, if they have a history of hitting people with objects, you probably wouldn't want to hand them the broom in the kitchen and have them help you sweep the floor. Could become dangerous really quick. So be mindful of the person that you're working with and, only hand them things that are safe. Another thing I've seen is like tablets, it's, a lot of people's, most preferred object, and in a frustrating situation, it can go flying, it could become damaged. And then that could lead to more of a crisis situation because now potentially their most preferred item is now broken and they can't use it anymore. And somebody could potentially get hurt in the process. So, always be mindful of that. In these situations where the wait strategy is being used, the person should be interacted with by, should not be interacted with by you or anyone else, unless someone's safety is at risk. You're just waiting it out. Remain at a safe distance, like we said before. Try to leave 2 of the individuals arm lengths away or more. Just to make sure that if the situation escalated and they were to move towards you, that you can move away quickly. Do not respond to any provocations or statements that the person's making, as this may encourage the behavior the person's exhibiting and cause the situation to continue. When the individual appears calm, the helped and prompt strategies can then be attempted again. This is like we keep saying, this is going to vary person to person. If the individual begins to become upset again when you try to offer help or prompt them, waiting longer may be necessary, but each person's going to be different. They're going to have a longer period of time. So even if they seem calm, maybe they still need another 5, 10, 15 minutes. It varies person to person. People calm, I'm jumping the gun here. People calm down at different rates. So this could take no time at all or a lot of time, depending on the person. If at any point during this time there are safety concerns or the person continues to not be calm for a significant amount of time, the crisis plan should be implemented to attempt to de-escalate the situation.
Just some considerations, some of these things Zach had already kind of talked about, but there's no magic button that we can press when someone is upset to immediately calm them or solve all of the person's problems for them. So we just need to remember to have some patience with this process of de-escalation. I used a really cheesy example for this one. It's like an ice sculpture. We're chipping away a little bit at a time, and sometimes we need to use different tools to get the end result that we want. So you can kind of have that image in the back of your mind of like, okay, I'm chipping away at this ice sculpture. It might take another 25, 30, 40, 80 minutes. I might have to figure out a different strategy to use. So just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. We also need to remember that rapport building happens before and after de-escalation. We're not building rapport and becoming their best friend when they're upset. So we definitely want to focus on that when the person's calm, when they're ready to engage, and when they can kind of build that rapport with you. And that's probably going to help you during this process too. So we definitely want to be working on that all the time when the person is not escalated. We always want to use simple and concise language and avoid rushing the person. I don't like being rushed. I can't imagine that someone that's upset wants to be rushed either. This person is unlikely to be thinking rationally because they're upset, right? And how they usually process things is not going to be the same in this situation. It might take longer for them to process. We want to give them extra time to process what we're saying when we're speaking to them, and use that very simple language so there's less for them to kind of sift through. It's stressful also, when others are in stress or in distress. When my baby cries, I start sweating immediately and I'm like, so I get it. But it's our job to try to remain as calm and as cool as possible, so that we're not exciting the person more. Sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes, we worked 24 hours in a row. Sometimes we're burnt out. So just checking in with ourselves again, tapping out, calling for help when we need it, or we feel like we're losing control of ourselves and our emotions. Just kind of, thanks, Danielle. Kind of what we had said earlier, I think Zach talked about, one person should be addressing the client. Think about when you're upset or, in distress yourself. Do you want one person talking to you or do you want 5 people talking to you? You probably only want one person talking to you at a time, because more than one person coming at you with, oh, calm down, maybe go over here. Are you okay? That's, confusing. It's overwhelming. That could irritate you more. Yes, Lynette, it could look like an attack, right? It's just everyone coming at you and you're like, ah. So we definitely want to just focus on one person at a time, especially, if you need to tap out, that's fine, communicating with whoever you're working with if you do have somebody else working with you, but making sure that only one of you are addressing that person at any point in time. In the event of escalation between peers, it's often necessary to initially focus on separating those individuals that have conflict with each other, and then kind of working on, if we need to de-escalate this person or both people, and kind of splitting up staff, or kind of just figuring out in the moment. So like I had kind of said before, there's no magic button. I don't know the last time anyone had watched Men in Black, the original ones, but in the movie, they've got this like special magical gadget that they kind of press, and it erases the person's, memory from the last however many minutes. And we don't have a tool like that to kind of fix everyone's problems and make them forget their, woes. So we just have to remember to be patient and try to follow these steps as best as we can, and kind of work with what we've got.
See a comment in the chat about having others leave the area. I think that that's, great, because, when you're working with somebody, they don't need other people listening to what's going on, and, maybe being embarrassed, or it could just escalate the situation further. So I think that that's a great recommendation. All right, so next we'll talk about the most important part of our jobs, positive interactions, and the difference between negative interactions, to prevent ourselves from using negative interactions too much, because we might not even know that we're using those negative interactions. I've looked for the magic wand, says someone in the chat. All right, so in applied behavior analysis, the majority of behavior change procedures are based in positive proactive strategies that promote adaptive and pro-social behaviors. So when someone feels good about themselves and the interactions they are having with the interactions that they're having with others, they'll typically do more of that behavior to obtain more of those good feelings and interactions in the future. Because we are positively interacting with clients when they are engaging in appropriate behaviors, they are more likely to display those appropriate behaviors more often in the future. If we only engage with clients when they're engaging in those challenging behaviors that we don't want to see, they will continue to display those behaviors because that is what they're getting their staff's attention for. I saw in the chat earlier, somebody commented on that, if you're, giving, I forget specifically how it was said, it's a little further back, but, giving attention to those behaviors, it's only going to make that person, especially if they're seeking staff attention, they're going to keep displaying those challenging behaviors to just continually get that attention from staff. So we got to kind of break that cycle. We should also monitor ourselves and model for clients what appropriate social interactions look like. So there's always something that you can find a client doing that is positive, and praise them for this behavior, even if it's something just small, like them helping out, just find those opportunities. If a client's yelling, but they're expressing their feelings to you, you can praise them for communicating their feelings with you. You can ask them, how you can help them in a quiet voice and promote their tone matching your tone, and then praise them when their tone does match your tone. So you can always find those opportunities.
So I added this to the slide. Zach didn't quite understand what I was going for with this, but I chose it because the Men in Black and the aliens are dancing together. They're building that positive rapport with each other and working together and having fun. Positive interaction.
It makes sense now that you explained it to me.
Yeah. So positive versus negative interactions. Just kind of going over the list quickly here. In a positive interaction, it might look like welcoming the person into an activity, or a group, or class, etc. Offering to play a game that we know the person likes, asking the person to teach us something. I love that one. Getting involved. So maybe we know that they like playing Mario Kart, and they're playing Mario Kart, and we're like, hey, can we come play with you? Going for a walk together. Just doing simple little things together, praising them for appropriate behavior. If that is something that's reinforcing for the person, just finding those little things and engaging with them on a regular basis to build that rapport and have those positive interactions. Negative is going to be, telling them to do something, providing corrective feedback, giving some sort of bad news. This includes, redirection. I personally, the other day this happened. I had a rough morning. I walked into the office. I didn't say hi to anyone. I think Zach said hi and I was just like, ugh. How does that make Zach and my coworkers feel if I'm walking into this shared environment where, these other people work and I've got a chip on my shoulder? That's not going to build rapport with my coworkers or be a positive interaction with my coworkers. It's going to make them think I can't talk to Tiffany today. She's being a butthead. I'm not going to get anything done with Tiffany with the cases that I share with her. So I'm just going to not talk to her today. And it can really affect other people. So we just need to be mindful that, we're working for the clients that we serve. Yes, we work in their spaces, but it's their spaces that we're working in, right? These are their homes. These are their jobs. These are, the vehicles that they go places in. For us, you are on a payroll, right? But for them, this is their life. So we need to just make sure that if we do have a bad attitude for whatever reason, your car broke down or, your boyfriend broke up with you or whatever happened before your shift, you got to leave it at the door. You got to walk in. I love when, sorry, I'm just reading the chat here. Yeah, don't start ordering people to do things immediately. I love seeing a staff member that enters their shift and says hi and greets literally every single person in the environment. They go up to every single person, ask how they've been doing since they last saw them, whatever happened before, it's gone. And, they're coming into this new environment with, a positive aspect and trying to start the day off right. Yeah, yes, Danielle, the mood and attitude definitely influences the people around you. So just making sure that we're mindful of ourselves and trying to really, really drive home, like having those positive interactions with people, because that's what's going to help us when we're trying to de-escalate is, this is someone that I can trust. This is someone that likes me and I like them. And, they're helping me right now. I can trust that they're helping me. Yep, I'm sorry, I'm paying attention to everything here. So yeah, we also want to show that we're there for the person and ask them what they would like to do or invite them to do something with us. I love asking clients to teach me something. Or, to help me, do something. Or, if a client is like, I'm really good at painting, I'm like, ooh, we should paint sometime. You could teach me how to paint. And, I find value in teaching other people things, and it makes me feel, good about myself that I can help another person. And I'm sure that that's the same thing for our clients, finding value in yourself of, I can contribute to the world and I can contribute to helping this person, learn something today. We're all people and we all kind of have those common things, right? I have so many people on my caseload that love to, teach other people things and they love to teach their peers things. So that's something that we can definitely tap into of, hey, teach me how you did that. We can always find something appropriate that our client is doing and praise them for it. I feel like I was going to say something else and I forgot what it was. Oh, and there was something else. I also, when I walk into a client's, home or space to observe them, when I'm on my way out, I always thank them for letting me, visit them and spend time with them and let them know that I do value their time. And I also ask, hey, what's the best time for me to come and see you next time, to let them know that I do value, their time and space. And if, this was a bad time today, like what would be a better time next time that I can come and spend time with you? Just, making sure that we're respecting the people that we work with. And we're not just saying, well, this time works best for me, so I don't care what you're doing. I'm going to come and do this thing with you at this time. We definitely want to just make sure that these are the people that we serve. These are their lives, and we want to just express that, we respect them. Getting into the negative interactions again, that includes prompting people to get dressed, to clean their room, to take a shower, to come eat dinner, to take their medications, etc. We're prompting them to do something. Even if they like doing that thing, we're still telling them, you got to do this thing. And that is what we're kind of saying is a negative interaction. This also includes redirection from one activity to another. So maybe they're engaging in something that's not the most appropriate. So we're saying, hey, can you maybe do this right now? So if someone's talking loudly, we're asking them to speak a little bit quieter, even if you use please. That is going to be classified as more of a negative interaction. And then we also, it's not on this slide, but we also have neutral interactions, which is what we focus on portraying during de-escalation, like we talked about prior. Neutral is that calm facial expression, body language. We want to be as neutral as possible. When individuals become agitated, we're going to maintain that neutral poker face. We're going to have posture that's confident without being challenging. We're going to avoid prison guard, like crossing our arms and kind of grimacing at people. We're just going to be, all right, kind of calm. So yeah, I think that covers positive versus negative plus neutral interactions there.
While Tiffany was talking, I see some good positive interaction comments in the chat, like showing interest in the person or the planned activity, being positive and engaged. I think that's really important. You know, if you really hate grocery shopping, you know, maybe don't let the individual you're working with know that, because, you know, if you're complaining before you go to the store, it's probably only going to make for a negative experience for everybody, because then they're probably going to internalize some of those feelings that you're having. They know you don't want to be there. Yeah, trying not to have bad days. You know, I saw Danielle's comment on here too, you know, about, you know, your attitude and your mood coming into your shift makes a big difference on how the day is going to go, both positive and negatively. Yeah, if somebody doesn't want to join an activity right away, you know, let them, you know, come into the activity at their own pace. You know, maybe try to give advance notice if it's something like out in the community and, you know, you can't leave the individual at home, you know, giving them advance notice, you know, like, hey, this is coming up, like, so they can kind of mentally prepare themselves so they're ready to go when it's time. But if it's something in the house, and, you know, it's just whenever the activity starts, they can start the activity. You know, don't force people to do stuff necessarily that they don't want to do. You know, try to encourage as much as possible without being pushy. Effective communication. Yeah, communication is definitely key. Yeah, and being a great listener about, you know, just what the person wants and doesn't want. It's just going to lead to a better interaction. Telling them goodbye. Yep, I think Tiffany touched on that too. You know, it's just, you know, important, you know, to communicate, you know, when you're coming and going, and being positive. Great comments. So we'll move on to the next one. So it's important to try to make negative interactions as infrequent as possible. It's inevitable that at some point during the day, you may have to ask someone to do something that isn't a preferred thing for them to do. You might redirect an undesirable behavior, you know, the list goes on. You know, there's always going to be something that's not super positive that you got to address. Before a negative interaction, you know, always, you know, assess for safety. This could include making sure that, you know, another staff is close by for maybe additional support if they're available, or that the environment doesn't have any hazards. You know, we've kind of already talked about this before, so we won't go into it again, but just making sure safety is always key. If you know something, you know, that you're asking somebody, you know, to do or not do, you know, might trigger, you know, them to go up those steps of escalation. Always be respectful to the individual. If prompting someone to do something, say it in a tone of voice that's calm and non-demanding. You know, if possible, like we said earlier, you know, offer a choice of tasks for that, you know, that thing that you're asking them to do, or, you know, maybe make them feel like they have more of a choice. Like, you know, do you want to like shower now, or do you need 5 more minutes, or do you want to wake up now or in 5 more minutes? You know, giving those opportunities for the person to choose to make it feel like they have more control, and giving them that control, you know, when you're able to. If it's not, you know, a significant situation, you know, maybe where, you know, they're like sitting in soiled clothes, you know, that's a little bit more urgent, you know, if they've, you know, leaked out into their bed or something like that, you know, and you need to change them sooner rather than later. Make sure to put yourself in the person's position and think about how you would feel if you were being spoken to, you know, the way that you were speaking to the individual. You know, try to keep it, you know, more positive and upbeat. If addressing something that may embarrass the person, try to do so privately, away from other peers or other people when possible. You know, just maybe even like a quieter tone of voice if they're in a room with other people. It's just going to make, you know, the person probably more likely to comply if they're not, you know, going to be upset from being embarrassed with what was said to them. Keep the interaction brief. No one likes to hear about something they need to do, something that they didn't do right, or something that they should stop doing. And then keeping the interaction brief, keeping the message concise and clear may also help the person understand what is expected of them in the future and help with processing. So short, sweet, request with still obviously being polite and positive. It's also important to try to have positive interactions as soon as possible after a negative interaction. If an individual stops exhibiting a behavior or does what's asked of them, really try and immediately praise them for, in a way that they would find reinforcing. I know in the chat in the beginning, somebody said like, the individual that they're working with, doesn't like verbal praise, trying to find a way, that they like praise, whether it's, like a fist bump or a high five, something silent that doesn't draw like attention to them if they're not looking for attention, but still, letting them know that they did a good job in a way that they find reinforcing. And this will obviously help increase the likelihood that they'll, continue to do what's asked in the future. It's also important to be mindful when speaking with an individual, speaking about an individual in front of them. When I visited, family homes and different agencies, you're there to discuss what's going well, but also what's not going so well, because usually, we're coming into that environment when, there's concerns that, the agency or the family is trying to address. So sometimes the negative interactions can overshadow the positive ones, and this can be upsetting to the individual. Similar to when addressing concerns with the individual directly with them, trying to find a private location, maybe away from the individual or peers, or just speaking quietly, out of earshot is often best when discussing this concerning behavior, because, like we said, nobody wants to hear about all the things that they're doing wrong. It's only going to potentially make the situation worse. For some people that could, lead to, them becoming, exhibiting some of those behaviors because they might become frustrated and upset.
Yeah, I like that too, Lana, on stage and off stage. That's a good one. All right, so I don't know if anyone's heard of this, but there is a 5-to-1 rule. So in environments where we've got a 5-to-1 rule, which is basically making sure that we have at least 5 positive interactions with the person for each one interaction. Research has demonstrated a ton of benefits. There's increased cooperation, decreased frequency of challenging behaviors, indicators that individuals and staff are happier and more satisfied. Why not 6-to-1, 3-to-1? Research has indicated 5-to-1 is the most effective ratio. I don't know how they figured that out, but apparently that's it. And I'm not trying to tell everyone like we got to count how many, like on our hands every time we interact with somebody, but it just to kind of have that ratio in the back of your mind, like, oh, I just prompted them to go wash their hands. Like, let's praise them for washing their hands. Let's, find something fun to do together after that. Let's praise them for communicating with us, or, ask about their day. Just trying to make sure we've got that balance in the back of our minds and being mindful of that. Negative interactions, like we had said before, includes redirection. We only want to use it when it's absolutely necessary in the best interest of our individuals. So, for example, I've, witnessed a lot of, staff or family members telling individuals to sit down, right? Do they have to sit down right now? That's one negative interaction. And then, maybe it wasn't quite necessary either. Like if nothing bad was coming of them standing up or pacing, then they don't need to sit down. So that's just one thing I kind of thought of when I was, kind of going through this of, we really want to kind of think in our minds, like what is necessary for us to what's necessary for us to kind of redirect individuals to do. Negative interactions are, like Zach had said, inevitable. And when we're providing, a structured setting, and staff we shouldn't avoid negative interactions, right? Because we have to prompt people to do things, no matter what, right? But we should be as skilled as possible when we're presenting them. That way it's minimally aversive. And like Zach was saying before too, negative interactions, we want to keep it as private as possible and avoid embarrassment, keep it brief, concise, clear, and consistent.
So at the beginning of the presentation, you guys were promised fun at the end. So we're going to do a short pop quiz using the chat box for a chance to win prizes. So whoever can answer each question correctly first in the chat will get a $5 Dunkin' Donuts gift card, and then Danielle will contact you if you were the first one to get it. Even if you're not the first, feel free to still type out the answer, and then we will say what the correct answer is afterwards. All right, everybody ready? Let me move I got the chat box. I got our video pulled up. Let me move everything out of the way so I can read the question. Can't remember if it's Tiffany or I first. It's you first, Tiffany. Go ahead.
All right, guys. When should we use, oh, wow, we already have people.
We already had answers coming in.
Didn't even read it yet. When should we use the pause strategy? A, nothing else is working. B, mild signs of agitation. Or C, the person is likely to comply with your request. Think about pause. Where is it in that red, yellow, green in that staircase?
All right, everybody get their answers in. All right, the answer for the, sorry, Tiffany, stealing your thunder. Go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. The answer is A, nothing else is working. You know what? Did we have wait? Is that why? Oh my goodness, Zach, we never corrected it to wait.
Oh.
So pause is also wait. I'm so sorry, guys. We'll have to correct that for next time. But so we're waiting for the person. Nothing else is working. We've tried the support prompt or the help prompt strategies for the person, and they appear to just need some time to calm down.
All right, great job, guys. All right, so question 2, when should you switch to another de-escalation strategy? A, nothing else is working. B, the person is calming down, or C, both of those answers. Right. I still see answers coming through. Great job, guys. All right, correct. It's going to be both of those answers. So de-escalation strategies are meant to be used fluently as the person is becoming upset and as they are calming down. Gauge your client's behavior based on your knowledge of them and use the strategy that best suits the moment that you're in. So here's the last one.
All right, which of the following is an example of a negative staff interaction? A, George, would you like to sit by me in the van today? B, Sarah, let's practice your coping skills. Or C, Brittany, your hair is so pretty today. All right, the answer is B, Sarah, let's practice your coping skills. Even though you're following Sarah's behavior plan by asking her to practice her coping skills throughout the day, you're offering to do her coping skills with her, you are telling her to do something which counts as a negative interaction. You could make this positive by saying, Sarah, since you're so awesome at practicing your coping skills, can you teach me how to do them with you?
All right. Congratulations. You are now ready to become de-escalagents with the function-based investigations. Thank you for all participating today. Daniel will contact you, if you answer those pop quiz questions correctly to get you out that gift card. I do see that we have a few Q&A questions here that are popping up. Oh, sorry, people are putting their answers in there. And then there's conversation about choices, who we live with. Yeah. So yeah, trying to encourage, not everybody necessarily has a choice of who they live with, but, trying to make, the situation and the environment as best as possible for the individuals, I think is great. And offering that choice, if a home opens up and the person's able to move, I think that's great to offer that person the choice if they're able to have that choice.
I also wanted to just say before we kind of all hop off, or if you guys have any questions, please type them into either the Q&A or the chat, preferably Q&A. But this is a great refresher for a lot of people, and it's also a great training that we can offer to our, direct care staff or families that we serve. So I think like Danielle was saying earlier, this is recorded and it's going to be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So I think she said it takes about a month for it to get uploaded. So in about a month, check back to our YouTube channel, and you can always, offer this to, your clients' families or direct care staff for them to kind of review this information in de-escalation.
You have a lot of
those of you
questions
that's,
on if people are going to get an FBI badge.
I saw that. I was going to say we'll reward the people that stuck around. So Tiffany made us do a photo shoot for this. So we have a few other pictures after our sources here. we roughly photoshopped in the Men in Black scenery. You want to explain the head, Tiffany?
I went to cosmetology school for like a week, and I had to buy a kit with all of these mannequin heads. So we have a bunch around the office that are just kind of gag gifts that we scare each other with. So when we were taking our photos for this training, we added the mannequin head to it for some reason. So here you go.
One of our coworkers walked out to go on a visit while we were in the hallway messing around and taking these pictures. So she made it in the training if she's watching. So. All right. I think that's the last one. All right. Well, thanks for listening to us. We appreciate you guys joining.
Thank you so much, Zach and Tiffany. Just a quick reminder to give me about 14 days to get continuing education out to everyone. I will also send the presentation handout, so you will have access to that. Unfortunately, no FBI badges. But you're welcome to create your own. I think with Tiffany and Zach's blessing now. But again, give me about 14 days. And also please be sure to visit our website to sign up for our mailing list to receive upcoming mailings about webinars. And please be sure to check out information regarding our conference at the end of March. Thank you, everyone.